Right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. So my name is Drew Savage. I work over in the UVA Career Center. Thank you all students, alumni so much for popping in today, especially our alumni volunteers coming in to help out our students. Definitely are thankful for you all and your support and looking forward to hearing your stories. Students, as I mentioned, if you can put your computing ID in that chat box for us, we're using that to follow up with you with information. Students, also, we're going to be not doing breakout rooms today. So if you have questions you'd like to ask the panelists during this session, please put it in that Q&A feature. And we'll use that Q&A feature at around 7 o'clock to start asking questions. So the event flow will be introductions from our alumni to start. Then I'll ask them a couple of questions and we'll have them kind of answer and go through that way. And then after that, we'll have time for your questions as well. So looking forward to it and looking forward to a great event. So to get started, I'm just going to have each of the panelists introduce yourself. Just give us your name, tell us what you're doing currently work-wise, and just a little bit about yourself. And I will have you get us started, Lee, if you don't mind. Thank you so much.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lee Price, and I graduated from UVA in 2008 with a degree in English and Spanish, and I was completely lost in my initial job search after college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I've always wanted to be a writer. And so now 12 years later, that's what I do. But it took me a long journey to get here. After working at a bunch of different places, now I run my own consulting firm. I work for myself, which is kind of the dream. It's awesome. But I love talking to UVA students and helping them figure out kind of how they can take their first step towards building something that they're excited about. I live in Valdosta, Georgia. I'm married to a UVA grad who's a Air Force pilot. So we've moved all over the country, and we have 2 little kids. And right now, just trying to balance parenting and running a business and him being in the military. So it's been interesting.
That's awesome. Thank you. Zach, why don't you go next for us, sir?
Sure. My name's Zach Karr. I graduated UVA in 2009 with a history major. Like Lee, was very lost in my job search initially. Ended up at a defense contractor for a year doing intel recruiting, then hopped over to Deloitte. And from the Virginia, DC area, basically spent my first 27, 28 years there. Then moved to Texas for grad school. I've been in Dallas now for 4 years. I got into digital product management and am now back at Deloitte for my second round there doing digital strategy within their innovation and platforms practice.
Awesome. Thank you. Allison, will you just introduce yourself, tell us about your background and what you're doing now?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Martin. I was class of 2008. Also a Spanish major. So hi, Lee. I don't think we met, but pretty cool to be from the same program. So I also had no idea where I was going, what I wanted to do. When I graduated, I ended up teaching English in Spain for a year after school, after graduating from UVA, before going to grad school for natural resources and sustainable development, and a dual degree in international affairs. So I spent a year in Costa Rica at a UN university there, and then a year in Washington, DC at American University. And I've been living in DC now for the past 10 years. My first job out of grad school was with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, working in partnership with Native American tribes, Alaska Native villages, and communities on both sides of the Mexico border on water resource issues. And now I've been with the Nature Conservancy for about 6 years, and I work on our global Indigenous peoples and local communities program. I've lived in Brazil a couple times with this program, and specifically work to support a culturally responsive approach to gender integration and human rights issues.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome, Allison. Glad to have you. Jackie, you want to go ahead next for us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Uribe. Graduated in 2008. I was in economics and also Spanish major, so keeping the theme going. Also kind of felt like I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Felt a little bit lost with kind of the job search and the graduation process. But after graduation, I landed initially at SNL Financial, which is a financial data company. It's actually headquartered in Charlottesville. as an analyst, and I worked in their new product development group for a number of years, standing up new industry verticals and geographic expansions. And then from there, kind of pivoted over to where I am now at Appian Corporation. So I'm currently a technical delivery manager at Appian, and Appian is an enterprise low-code platform. So basically, we work with large companies to automate workflows and build out business process management for them. So I partner with our clients to, kind of help them make the best use of the platform, and then also with our teams of consultants that are actually implementing solutions on the platform. And I live in Alexandria with my husband and young daughter.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. Ross, want to go next for us, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Ross Blankenship. I was an '08 grad, also an English major. I was friends with a lot of people in the comm school, and so when graduation came up, they all had jobs, and I panicked and took a job at an insurance underwriter, as an insurance underwriter in New York, which was a bad fit. And then worked on a fixed income trading floor for a little bit as an analyst, and then went to grad school and got a PhD in psychology and did consulting for almost 10 years, about 7 or 8 years. And just in January left a big consulting job to start a software company to build an assessment platform. So have also been kind of around around and about to get to where I am today, and am hunkered down in place in Atlanta with a wife who also works, also a UVA grad, '07 grad, a 16-month-old and 2 dogs. So we're trying to figure out how to work from home and take care of a kid.
I'm with you. There's a few of us that are with you. I totally get it. Tabb, you want to finish this off, sir?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name's Tabb Wyllie. I graduated 2009 out of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences here at UVA. I was actually a systems and information engineering major, and I was actually fortunate enough to have an offer before the real downturn started back when I graduated, and they didn't revoke it like I saw many of my friends unfortunately have to go through. But my first job was with a Big Four advisory firm, KPMG. I was in their IT advisory practice, and frankly, I hated it. It's definitely the worst job I ever had. Stayed there for 3 years, and fortunately, used a UVA connection to pursue an opportunity with a kind of more boutique consulting firm called Navigant, and there I did more process optimization, process management in the financial services industry. Stayed there and moved between DC and New York for a few years until about 2 years ago when, similar to Ross, I got pretty tired of the consulting lifestyle and felt like I was maybe getting too pigeonholed, and did a complete industry change into ship construction, which is where I work now. So that was a pretty interesting and challenging process to go through, which may have some similarities for entering the job market here. But I've been there for about 2 years now, and I'm helping lead their program and project management division or vertical. So.
Thank you all so much. So students, a good variety in industry and story. So we're excited to hear more. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions of the panelists, and then students, if you have questions you'd like me to ask them towards the end of the program, there's a Q&A feature at the bottom. Please feel free to submit questions in there. So first question, and alums, feel free, anyone who feels called to respond to this, please do. The job search in 2020 grads is going to look a little bit different than in the past and they anticipated. So how important was it in your experience to be flexible, and how can students now adjust their expectations?
I'll jump in. I think it's super important to be flexible. Obviously now things have changed for everyone, including the people who would potentially be hiring you. When I was graduating from UVA, I was really focused on wanting to work in book publishing. I wanted to work for a book publisher in New York, period. That's what I wanted to do. I did an interview program through UVA, didn't get any of the jobs. So it was April, it was this time of my 4th year, and I just had no idea what I was going to do. And getting flexible and opening my mind to what I could do first was really important to me. So I took a job as a marketer at a digital publishing company in DC. It's not where I wanted to live. It's not what I thought I wanted to do. But that was really a platform for me to grow a lot of new skills and to learn everything. I mean, you learn everything on the job. And if I had not been open to that, to a job that I actually found on Craigslist, back in 2008, you could still find jobs on Craigslist. I wouldn't have moved in the next direction. So my advice is just, you're not looking for your dream job. You're looking for your first job, and you're going to learn so much on your first job. So if you can change what you're looking for and just look for a place that you can learn and figure out what you're good at and what you like and what you want next, I would consider that a success.
Yeah, building on that, I feel like I went through this twice. You know, the first time was right after UVA before grad school, and the second time was after grad school, and agree that, you know, one of the most important things I think that I did was assess the different factors that are important to me. And, you know, obviously compensation is a major one of them, but then within that, it's like, are you trying to get experience in a particular field, or are you trying to actually be in a particular geographic location, or is it most important to you to get direct work on the ground, you know, or is it more important to you to be like more of like research or think tank? So it's kind of like those different facets of what's the most important thing, and then being persistent and then being flexible within that. So it's like, okay, I really wanted, after UVA, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to keep speaking Spanish. And it was the most important thing for me was finding anything that would exercise that language and would take me out of the country. And I actually had I was going to work for a tourism company in Argentina, and it just absolutely fell through. And I ended up circling back to this like culture assistant opportunity in Spain. And they were like, sure, you can come late. It's no big deal. And, you know, it was just reaching out. I was like, there's no way I'm 3 months late on this opportunity now. But I think that's a combination. It's like co-creating, like being persistent in what you want, but then opening to what you're getting given back by the universe. So I think it was, and then out of grad school, same thing. I just applied, got rejected. I applied to probably like 35 jobs on the West Coast because that's where I wanted to be, one job in DC where I wanted to leave. And then I was just getting rejected left and right. And I said, well, forget this. I'm going to go hike the Appalachian Trail. And my third day on the trail, I got a call from the EPA and got interviewed there, and then like had to pack up and move to DC. So I think sometimes it's like, if you can afford a little bit of space too, it's like be persistent and then know when to be quiet and like let stuff flow back in. So flexibility, yeah, pretty important. I
agree with Allison and Lee. I think it's maybe worth considering that everybody, all 5 or 6 of us, I think probably left with our first job and felt like that was a bad fit. And I think about maybe the difference between being flexible and adaptable. I was talking to my wife about this, where like I think of adaptability as like responding to the change. A little bit what Allison was saying of like, let things come back to you. I prioritized wanting to be in New York City, not the job. And so I did like anything I had to do to get a job in New York. And then I found out that, you know, for me, the job was enough of a demotivating factor to not want to be in New York anymore. And it took some time to kind of rearrange everything and get back on the right course. But I think the other thing I would say is like, this is a huge opportunity right now also, where you need to figure out what do you need to prioritize. Like if you need to make money, there are companies making a lot of money right now, and there are companies that are growing and adding jobs. If you can afford to take some time to work for free, that was similar to Lee. I had an offer at O Magazine, but it was an unpaid job. I wanted to be a writer, and I needed to make some money, and so I took a job at an insurance company. But if you can afford to take unpaid internships or work for people who wouldn't ever pay you to be near them, it's a huge opportunity to get in the sphere of people that you want to be around. And also just that this decision feels huge, but it's not a disaster if you make the wrong decision. You can course correct, and you'll learn, and you'll change, and the things that you value will change. And so I think just keep that in mind as you go.
Yeah, and I think building on that, you know, like Ross was saying, looking for the bright spots that are out there right now in terms of industries that are, seeing increased demand because of the situation that we're in, and will actually be in a position where they're looking to hire more because they're struggling to actually process that. I think too, trying to take the skill set that you have and align that with what organizations are looking for, even if it's not exactly what you thought you would be doing. It may be a way to kind of get your foot in the door and then pivot at a later point in time to what you really saw yourself doing, or maybe just kind of grow within that initially. I think when I moved from SNL to Appian, I was someone that was kind of thought of as a career switcher. I went from working in finance to working in software and IT. But to me, Appian was really interesting as an organization. I put my resume out there. I actually applied for a job in our engineering groups doing something similar that I kind of knew a little bit about from SNL, and they said, that's really interesting. We actually want to look at you for a completely different department. And that's where I've been for 6 years now. So I'd say don't be afraid to kind of look at something different than what you thought you'd be doing, because it could end up actually being a better fit, or it's a foot in the door and it's something that you can pivot to something else later.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. That was great. Students, those of you who have popped in, please put your computing IDs in the chat box so you can use that to follow up later with you all if you haven't done that already. So next question is, how do you feel as though your career has and will continue to change to the ever-growing nature of our digital world? And does the class of 2020 have an advantage in the job market being digital natives?
I can, I guess, step up and take that. My first job out of school was, again, just doing basically cold call recruiting for defense contractors, talking to people in the intel, a lot of engineers in that space, and trying to place them onto government contracts. And much like I think everybody really said in that first answer, I realized it wasn't really a fit right away, but I realized what I liked, what I didn't like, and leverage that to get a job in Deloitte. And again, this is somebody with a history major that was calling people recruiting, and I ended up basically as a human capital tech consultant. So worked on a lot of big like reporting, data warehouse projects that really required a big tech knowledge that I just didn't have. It was something I kind of got up to speed by getting friendly with the engineers on my team. But again, this is working on large, corporate software solution projects. And then after going to business school, I knew I wanted to get into digital product management. I also knew at the same time that looking at a page of code made my eyes cross, and it was something I was definitely, I didn't want to get into myself, but it was something I wanted to understand and really be able to create these digital products and experiences that could help the companies I worked for and the customers we had, have better experiences. So I by no means can code, but I can talk to what makes good software and what makes good digital experiences. And I know just as I've gotten more ingrained in that world, I think like hearing about SQL, Python, that stuff was nowhere near where it was 10 years ago. And I think as I talk with analyst consultants, the younger people that I work with, that's definitely something that they are, they all seem to kind of come into the companies having. And I think just having that digital knowledge, very senior people look to them to kind of spearhead these projects that are above their pay grade, above their pay scale. And I think it's definitely something that will benefit and help this, I guess, what 2020 class and beyond.
Yeah, and I'll fall onto that. My old industry, which was financial services, was very kind of tech savvy, and moving into like shipbuilding and ship construction, there's a lot of let's say like legacy players, and I think this is representative of a lot of industries where you've got companies that have been established for many, many years that frankly have fallen behind from a technical and competitive perspective. And like our organization is looking to not age down, but almost inject like that new blood to really take us into the future. And I don't think we're alone in kind of lagging behind the overall trend. And I talk to my friends in like the Bay Area or New York, and I tell them about our current technology and systems, and they think I'm crazy. But I think there's a lot of companies like that in industries like us that that have the opportunity for some people that are young and bright and creative problem solvers to really come in and make a difference. And it's funny because I was talking to our HR team, and I think a lot of companies right now are almost right sizing their business because of the economic downturn. So like you're trimming off all the nice to have aspects of the company. And we were talking about when we need to kind of ramp back up from a production perspective, because things will come back. Like the talent pool out of colleges is an interesting proposition, because the more seasoned, experienced talent pool that will be out there will be all the folks who got cut first. So it's almost like the folks who are out there for the first time, in many cases may be more attractive than like a pretty large supply base that is demanding a higher salary and may not have been top performers at a previous position. So just an interesting perspective, and who knows if that'll play out, but potentially a silver lining for the recent graduates.
One thing I wanted to say about being a digital native too, it's hugely helpful. I mean, I work in marketing, so anyone who understands how current social media platforms work is great. I already feel like a dinosaur at 34. I don't know like what TikTok is really. But another thing that I think applies for anyone who's in the class of 2020 is that one of your jobs, especially if people continue to work remotely long-term because of the pandemic, is really teaching older generations how to use some of this technology that people are thrown into using for the first time. So I was thinking about this today because I taught a client, a really smart, accomplished CEO in his 70s. I taught him how to use Google Docs because he couldn't figure out how to leave a comment on the doc we were working on it together. And if you can learn, maybe you can practice right now teaching your parents how to use Zoom. If you can learn how to talk to older people about how to use technology in a way that's not condescending, and you can speak their language and help them figure out how to use it, that could be super helpful in your first job, because you'll definitely be helping older people figure out how to use this stuff.
I think the other thing too, coming from now looking at software and being involved with our hiring and interviewing program for our services group, I think the other thing too is, even if there are things that you don't know, like Python, for example, or some coding language, showing that you have an aptitude to learn and drawing parallels where you've been able to teach yourself something else really quickly, right? Whether it's in a school setting or just something that you're really passionate about too. I think those kinds of things can help to draw parallels in terms of how you would be able to apply yourself to the job as well. So I'd say, don't necessarily short sell that ability that you have to learn something new, even if it's not already something that's on your resume.
All right, thank you. So a few of you have already touched on this, but could you just expand on what your first professional role was when you left UVA, and what were the most important factors in landing that position for you back then?
I'll jump in here. So I mentioned I was an English major, and my plan when I was graduating, well, before graduation, was to move west and live on a ranch and write. And for a host of reasons, I decided I needed instead to move to New York City. And because I decided very late to change from that course of action, I had basically no job prospects, and I pulled every networking string that I could and wound up getting a conversation at a company in New York because of my girlfriend's dad's friend. So I've had this conversation with a number of people recently, which is trying to get a job right now by applying online is not going to help. I think reach out to people, have conversations, because people will bring on people that they know or people who are referred to them. We've started a fellows program at our church in Atlanta, and we're looking to find internships. And it's like we're trying to direct people coming out of college to find internships, and the only leads we've gotten have come from conversations that we've had with people. And so I think especially in an environment where hiring might be frozen at certain companies, you can get around a lot of things like that if you know the right person or if you're introduced to the right person. And then just to encourage you on that front, I literally attended one of these from the business school maybe like a month ago, early April, where a couple of Darden grads were talking about entrepreneurship and venture capital in this environment. And I emailed one of the speakers who's a venture capitalist in the Bay Area yesterday, and he emailed me back today. So people will respond, especially if you leverage the UVA community. People will give you a shot, and it's a great opportunity to take like a low risk, high reward shot where, this guy could have never replied to me and that would have been fine. But now we might have a conversation, and now a venture capitalist might learn about my company. So I think doing things like that and trying to build relationships is probably the right way to go.
Yeah, just to piggyback on my first job I got so I graduated in 2009. I had a friend from 2008 who was at this government contracting firm. He knew I was looking, and that's how I ended up at my first spot. And every job I've had since has actually been through some kind of network. I went from there to Deloitte through somebody one of my friends from high school, even I got my MBA at UT, and they had an amazing career management program, lots of opportunities, but I ended up at Capital One in their digital management program, again, through a family friend who worked for Capital One Virginia, and they got me in contact with somebody in the Dallas office. And then, I'm going pretty deep here, but I was in their mortgage department, and they actually cut their mortgage department in 2017. So they about 1,500 jobs that were cut. I ended up sticking around in auto, but I actually ended up moving from there to 7-Eleven because a lot of Capital One, a lot of people that had worked there had gone over to 7-Eleven to basically start up their digital practice. And a director poached me. I never even worked with him or heard of him, but he was familiar with teams I had worked with. So he recruited me over there. And then the only success I've ever had by going to a website and applying for a job, this is my second round at Deloitte. And I remember when I was fed up at 7-Eleven, I just saw this job position, and it was kind of passive aggressive, but I was like, screw it, I'm just going to apply for this job. And a recruiter got back to me a day or two later, but I can't tell you how many jobs I've applied to without knowing anybody on company websites. You don't hear back. And this happens to be the only one that I did. And so networking through any connection possible. UVA brand is really, really strong. And from what I know, talking to my friends, we're always happy to help out another who. So.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about my first job, but I do know why I got it. It's because I had an internship with a tangible project-based experience that I could speak to. And obviously that's not going to be something every company looks for, but I think if you have, everyone in an interview is probably going to talk about like a student project or a assignment or something like that. So if you can really differentiate yourself and talk to something like a tangible project or process that you helped develop or work on with a company in a company setting with like some real problems and obstacles that interviewer can relate to, I think it makes you a much more real candidate, especially coming out as a recent graduate. So that to me was a real differentiator. And then, the networking thing, I hated networking, especially my first few years out of school. You feel like it's like this thing that like it's almost like cringy, right? And you really don't want to do it. But when I was looking to switch industries and careers, like I was going through LinkedIn, looking through like first and second connections, emailing people to get an interview at a company. And that was really the way to get past that initial like barrier. Like resume drops, to everyone's points, are like the first differentiator. Like if you can get past that, you got a actual substantial chance at the job. And like me, or throughout my experience, I feel about 4 times more comfortable hiring someone from a referral than I do like an interview process, because I think interviewing is super difficult. Like you're supposed to evaluate this person in a 45 or hour long session. So if I have a point of reference, especially someone that I just know and can not even like fully trust, but just, they've got a good read on people, and they refer somebody like that elevates you a couple points. So it might suck to reach out to people, but it really pays off, I think.
Awesome. Thank you all. So this is a big one. So how can the graduates of 2020 stay positive even when they are entering into an uncertain job market?
I have some thoughts on this. It is a really weird, crazy time. And even as you are going through the job search process, I think this is a good time to really lean into any side interests, hobbies, side gigs, side projects that you have going on. I asked a bunch of friends and other people who have gone through tough job searches for their advice. And that was one thing that I heard over and over is really show your work through a side project. So let's say that you want to be a food critic someday. This would be a great time to start an Instagram account or food blog or podcast about that as your interest, and to learn about it as you go. So even if you can't find a job that's going to start the day after graduation, you can definitely do things on the side for yourself about things that you're interested in that will help you learn. And I know tons of people who have launched second careers or new careers based on something that they just did on the side to start. I would also think about how you can volunteer right now, how you can meet people in your community who needs your help. Like, how can you show up for people who need help in the next few months? Because you never know who you're going to meet or what you're going to learn about yourself that could help you in your job search.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there's a lot of opportunity in, clearly what's happening is unprecedented in our lifetime. And there's so many things that are terrifying and really negative about this experience. I guess if there's an opportunity that I see, it's also about having this time for reflection, both about what Lee just mentioned, what's something that you didn't think about before that you could really get into now. And I think also like going this layer deeper of like, what is important to you? How do you want to be in the world as we come out of this quarantine? I think that something that I realized that surprised me is that there was, this is coming from a place of privilege in terms of being able to have stability in my job, to be able to see it this way. But I guess I was really struck by a little bit of a sense of relief that I had in terms of permission to do less. Like all of my travel was canceled, all of anything that I had been involved in, which I loved, which filled me up. But I have a sense that one thing that a lot of UVA students and graduates share in common is like pretty fast-paced life. I remember arriving at UVA and like hearing what everyone had done, and I was just like, I am just surrounded by I don't even know why am I here? And it's amazing and it's inspiring, and people are out there doing amazing things. But I think it's an opportunity for us to question the very structure of our world. Like, what is important? What is of most value to me in my community? And how what are the little ways that I can live a little bit differently to fill myself up in more meaningful ways moving out of this. And maybe there was things that I assumed or took for granted about what I had to do to be good or to do well or to be successful. And maybe that's looking a lot different now. And I think it's really okay to give ourselves permission to take some quiet time and just invite that to come bubbling up, you know, how that feels for each one of us.
I would add to that. I would not discount the fact that your graduating class is like experiencing a massive loss with the pushback of graduation and just the way that the world is right now. And that like that part of that feeling is grief, and you need to take time to process that. So like, you know, there's a big movement in the startup world right now about founder health. And I think taking time to evaluate like how you're doing and talking to somebody about it is a really good thing. Like, don't just ignore if you're feeling depressed or, yeah, I mean, I talk to somebody about that. That's a real thing, and you have a real loss that you have to grieve. And I think the other thing I would say, I totally agree with lean into your hobbies and your side hustles. I hate that term, but like lean into your hobbies, even if it's not a side hustle and you're bad at it. I was talking to somebody the other day who's picked up photography because they're just walking around all the time. And now they have like a little bit of a following on Instagram. It's like, oh, I really like this. This could actually maybe turn into something. But it also doesn't have to. And so I think the way that I found the jobs that I liked ultimately was basically like trying different things and realizing that the thing that always interested me the most about a job was why the people around me were doing that job, not the actual thing that I was doing. And it's like, maybe I should go study psychology. And so I think I would also note that the things I've liked the most they were always, I've learned recently that like the things that I'm most interested in, I was already interested in them before college also, or during college. So don't think that like you're going to step out and discover some brand new thing necessarily. You might already know the real answer. You just need to kind of tune into it.
Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Andrew. I was going to say one other thing to add.
Please do.
That I think just, you know, giving yourself grace right now. I can say it's very challenging in my personal situation, just, you know, trying to have a job and have a young baby and manage that. And I think we're all kind of experiencing this in our own way, and everyone has their own unique set of challenges. So, you know, trying to give yourself grace if you don't feel like you can, you know, pursue something right now, I think that's okay too. And I think too, just, you know, for this group of people coming from that class of 2008, I think it was a very different situation in many ways, but there are, you know, some parallels just in terms of the job market. Trying to keep in perspective just the long-term picture as well, you know, in terms of there will be jobs out there. There's going to be something for you, and there is a path forward. And I think a lot of what we've talked about is, you know, how do you maybe look at it a little bit differently than you would have before? How do you be creative and maybe try and find a fit with things that you didn't think you would before, or just try things generally and figure out that it's not actually what you like. But there is also that long-term picture.
One more thing I want to add. I love listening to all of your answers. This is awesome. I was just going to say that I remember feeling at the end of my fourth year, like it was the end of a lot of things. It was a really emotional time. Like it takes me back thinking about it now. So I know it probably feels like this is the end of a lot of things, and like you are hitting this wall, this dead end, and it's over, and you have to figure out what you're going to do. But I would just say, as much as you can, try to reframe that. Like, this is really a beginning for you, right? You're 22 years old. You're so early in this. You're brand new to having a career. You're going to take lots of different paths. There's lots of ways that you could go. Things are going to evolve a lot for you. I think we'll talk about that next. But as much as you can really look at this as a new beginning, and you're at the beginning of learning a lot of things about yourself and the world, the more I think it can feel exciting, even in a time that's really overwhelming.
I love that. Thank you all. That was wonderful. Thank you for those stories. That was huge. So, as Lee alluded to, next question and last question is, how has your career changed since you graduated in '08 and '09? What was that experience like for you?
I can share a little bit, and I'd also, because I think my answer goes into what's the question that's in the Q&A from Emily right now too, who is asking about, for those who got a graduate degree, how do you decide what program to pursue, and what from your first job helped you decide that? I think for me, those questions blend together. So just taking advantage to speak to both of those. So it shifted significantly. I mean, again, I majored in Spanish because I love speaking Spanish, and that's why I did that. So no real plan. And actually the way that, so again, I knew that I was pretty sure I didn't want to teach Spanish, but I wanted to continue to speak it in practice. And so that's why I pursued a first job that would just get me to a country where I could speak Spanish all the time. And so, as I moved forward, or I guess while I was still there, then honestly, what happened with me was that a family friend had done a lot of research around the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship Program for grad school. And they had done all this research about whether or not I was eligible because my grandfather had been a member, but he had passed, and all of this stuff. So they had done so much work. And really the way that I felt was, I don't want to go back to grad school if I don't know what I want to study, because I still had no idea. And I knew it was a huge investment of time and money. And I knew it should probably be more focused than I was in undergrad, where like any given semester, it was like naval science and religious studies. And, because that's just sort of how my whole UVA career went. But they'd done so much work collecting this Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship information that I was like, fine, I'll apply to grad school. And I had no idea what I wanted to do, but it was very serendipitous, because I was like, well, I still want to get somewhere where I can continue to speak Spanish. And then one thing led to another, and I found this amazing school in Costa Rica that's a peace and conflict studies school. And I was about to apply for their general program, and I saw that they had a natural resources focused program. And I grew up just over the mountain in Waynesboro, Virginia, and I was like, oh, I love the Blue Ridge Mountains. I mean, I'd love to learn how to protect them. That would be great. So I started studying natural resources. And then that was just like being in a school of 200 students from 60 different countries, many of whom were well into their 30s and 40s and had real life experience and had come back. I mean, that for me was utterly life-changing. And from that really targeted experience that was really outside of the classroom at grad school, I mean, I was like, yes, it is environmental justice and social justice and the nexus of that. And that is the path that I'm going to be on. And then I used the paper opportunities to, I think it was kind of what Ross said about pursuing hobbies that you might be bad at. I was like, I know nothing about what environmental justice looks like back in the US, shamefully so, but this is an opportunity to research it and write about it. And so, what does that look like specifically with Native American tribes? What are those experiences like? And so it was the start of a path that just kept, for the first time in my life, I felt like this is the path that I want to be on. And for my first job, it was through a friend of the family that I was living with in DC, was able to get me an interview at EPA. And there I transferred to another office. My job with TNC, actually, I did apply online. I saw this job come across and it was like the dream job. And so I applied online and I got it. So, it happens. But it really felt like it was this path that just kept sort of opening itself up to me at different turns. So I was very lucky in a number of ways. But I think it was also just trying to be open to again, like put out a little bit and listen to hear what you get back and take that next step. Even if you don't know 10 steps down the road what that's going to look like, the first step is good enough.
Yeah, so my path is a little bit different. I wish, like Allison, I was a little more focused on why I went to grad school. For me, I'd been at Deloitte for 4 years and I'd lived in Virginia, DC, basically my entire life. And my roommates, who were a couple years ahead of me, and a lot of my colleagues at work, they started going to business school. And I just told myself, I was like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to do this now. And so I just assumed that, I came from consulting. I know I don't want to go back to consulting, but if I go to business school, like they'll just figure it out for me. I'm paying them all this money. I'm going to school and I'm going to learn all these skills. Like people are just going to come find me. And I realized that quickly at business school, I was around, again, very, very smart people, much like UVA. Was definitely naive in that sense. But so I ended up at UT just, again, as a way to get away from Virginia and DC. But luckily within there, through all the classes I took and just talking with friends, I got turned on to like design thinking, found out that, UX, all this was a whole job field that a lot of major tech companies were beginning to hire for, and product management, product development was becoming this whole job family that I never knew existed. So I leaned hard into that, ended up at Capital One. Again, never thought I would be doing mortgage servicing and, taking people's loans and making it into a easier to understand interface for them. And then even from there, I went to 7-Eleven and was managing an app called 7Now, which is 7-Eleven's delivery program. And when I got there, day one, we were delivering to 10 stores in Dallas. And by the time I left, it was only a year and a half later, we were nationwide. And I still have no idea how I worked on a team that rolled that out so quickly, or that I ever thought I would be working for 7-Eleven to begin with. But I think having that open mindset, finding things like digital product management that really piqued my interest, that shaped a lot. And then I realized, again, the program was really interesting to work at, but I knew it was bleeding money, and I didn't understand why management at 7-Eleven kept pouring money into it. And I couldn't control some of the things that I thought would drive revenue or reduce down costs. And then this is coming out working at Capital One, where I knew we were profitable, but they still cut our entire department. So I wanted to take a step back from actually making the products and managing an engineering team to actually working more on digital strategy and working across industries and learning a lot more about different industries. And this Deloitte position I have now has allowed me to do that. So still working in the digital atmosphere, but I'm working on 3 different projects now, one on digital health, one on connected stadiums and connected smart districts and their associated cities. And then the other actually a data analytic project of matching the right students to the right, higher degree institutions like UVA. So it's just, I've enjoyed that, path I've taken, and I've learned a lot from each job on what I liked and what I don't like. And I think as I've grown in my career, been able to pick and choose jobs based off what those jobs will provide for me.
Yeah, I think if my 2008 self knew what I do now, I don't think I would quite understand what that meant exactly, or exactly how I would get to that, having an econ and Spanish background. So I actually did have success applying online. I did on-grounds interviewing for my first job. So plug. But yeah, I started at SNL as an analyst, which, who really knew what that meant. We hired pools of analysts at that point, and then it was kind of, you would either go work with a content team, or you would go work the help desk, and you would take calls from, investment bankers that had questions about the data and how to build out their spreadsheets. And I think part of it was luck that, I had this Spanish degree, and I decided I want to speak Spanish, but I want to do business, and I want to do something international. And it just, stars kind of aligned that we are standing up this new group to help with our expansion to Europe. And so definitely tried to market my Spanish degree. So that helped to kind of get my foot in the door and, do something that was interesting. And for the first year, I probably managed an Excel spreadsheet. It was a giant spreadsheet with probably 1,000 banks in it and any kind of data point that you could imagine. And so that was all I did, was I managed that spreadsheet. And then that kind of grew into, as we needed to actually build the product, doing more business analyst type work, and then eventually working more closely with our software teams. And it kind of got to a point where, there was this stuff that was really interesting that was happening technically, things like these SQL queries. And I said, can you show me how you did that? Can I, kind of validate that it's what it needs to be on the front end? And it's a sausage factory, it's dirty, it's messy, and we'll tell you when it's done. And so that to me was an opportunity to kind of look at other places where I could take this skill set that I had built, like Zach was saying, kind of doing more project management, something I didn't really know that existed before, but then pair that with something that allowed me to do something that was interesting to me and kind of get more into the weeds. And that was how I more laterally jumped over to Appian and, had that starting point of, I didn't really have a technical background. I wasn't a computer science major, but having, that interest in learning and being able to kind of market some of those skills allowed me to pivot over to something that was a little bit different.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I feel like I'm not answering your question anymore, Drew, but something that I look for when I've been hiring people in the past, I worked at a marketing agency for 7 years and was always hiring interns and new grads, is I was always looking for someone who was really curious and interested in learning and interested in being scrappy and figuring stuff out. So as I think about how my career has evolved, it's evolved in a direction that I wanted it to go in because I was really curious. So my advice to everyone who's here is just to read a lot, to keep your eyes open. There's so many chances to learn right now. I was just thinking about this. So many conferences are online and free right now that were planned to be in person this year and this summer. So if you know an industry that you think is cool, or a trade association in a certain area, there's a chance that you could go watch their conference online for free and really start to learn a lot. So if you have extra time right now, which you probably do, just stay really curious and take in as much information as you can and figure out how you could find that overlap between what you know you're good at and interested in and what someone else needs.
I wanted to jump in, follow up on a little bit of what Allison said in regards to Emily's question about how to decide about grad school. I think if you can afford to take a year in between undergrad and grad school, do that, because your perspective on life and why you're going to grad school will change dramatically. And just as a side note, just don't go to law school. Like, it might seem like a really good idea as a way of hiding from the economy, but you're going to wind up coming out and still not knowing what you want to do, and you're going to have a law degree and a lot of debt. Like, take a minute and think about that and go work in a kitchen or something. Like, do something else. And if you still want to do it a year from now, then go do it. But this seems like, I think, pretty obvious advice, but I think one thing I did when looking at grad school, and this was advice that was given to me, and it probably saved me a lot of heartache. My thought process was, I need to go to the most prestigious school possible. And I got into Columbia, and I wound up going to a no-name school in Southern California because the advice I got was, look at the jobs that people are taking when they're coming out of that program and see if that's what you want to be doing. And 2, look at the curriculum and see if the classes are actually going to teach you the skills that you want to have. And I knew that I wanted to do psychology and organizations and do career counseling and executive coaching and team effectiveness and assessments and that kind of thing. And the program at Columbia was all theory, and none of it was applied. And there were a bunch of reasons why I didn't go there. And that was an incredibly hard decision to make at the time. But I think looking at, like, you can call a program, you can talk to career services and say, where do people get jobs when they graduate from here? And if they're getting jobs at places like the Nature Conservancy or somewhere where you want to work, that's the type of program you want to look for, not what's going to look the best on a resume, because there again, the connections I made at my grad school have been connections that have pushed me through to companies that I didn't even know about, that had jobs that I've loved doing. And so I think, like, trying to get as practical as you can on that front, because that'll also motivate you through grad school as well.
Students, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. The question that they've been answering was, those of you who got a graduate degree, how did you decide what program to pursue? What was your first job that helped you decide what from your first job helped you decide to return to school? So that's the question that they're answering now. If there are any other questions, students, feel free to put them in while you're thinking. If you have any, alumni panelists, thank you so much for your time and your responses. I think it was incredibly helpful. The content was wonderful. And as students, I hope that you have enjoyed this and that it's been helpful. But alumni, just from all of us at UVA, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Looks like we got another question, which is great. Thank you for all your time. How can you make yourself stand out in networking, especially with cold contacts and limited experience?
Focus on the person you're reaching out to, not yourself. So show that you've done research about their company or their career. Start with why you're interested in who they are and what they've done. Start with them, and then share something about yourself that's relevant. And then use all of the good communication skills you've learned at UVA. I've been really impressed with the students that I've mentored through the UVA Career Center. They follow up with me. They send me emails about things I said they were going to when they were going to. You would be surprised how many people don't just follow some of that normal etiquette. So if you can be, like I said, focus on the other person, empathetic about what they're going through right now. New graduates are not the only ones that are affected by all the craziness going on. Everyone is experiencing some kind of hardship or difficulty right now. So focus on them, and then follow up and do what you say you're going to do, and be polite and kind. That goes a long way.
Yeah, I'd say just make sure it's authentic and that you come across as sincere if you're doing that. Because I've gotten some that are kind of like throwaway messages, and those aren't necessarily as well received. But I actually have an interesting story from when we were graduating. So one of my friends who graduated obviously in 09, he didn't have like a financial background at all. And he was really interested in working for this investment capital firm. So he went a more non-traditional approach and wrote like a handwritten letter to the CEO, and ended up getting like essentially like a internship job for the summer. And right now he's a VP at that company. So if you can make that personal touch, you can really, if you're creative, personal, and authentic, I think there's you can take a shot and you just might hit.
I agree with everything that's been said, especially the do your homework. I think don't reach out just because you feel like you need to talk to somebody. Like, tell them why you want to talk to them and what you're reaching out for. And also, I think it's common to email people and ask for time to talk on the phone, and it's really not always necessary. So just ask what you're asking for in the email. And I agree, don't make it feel like you wrote it just to that person, just write it to that person. I think the form email is pretty easy to spot and is less compelling.
Yeah, and I think you can also put options out there in terms of how people like to connect. I actually personally prefer phone calls, though I understand why people prefer email. But for me, if I have like half an hour window that I can just dedicate my attention to that versus an email that's always kind of like, I should do that now, and it's nagging in the back of my head. So for me personally, I actually really like the time and space of like, okay, for half an hour, I'm going to talk to this person. But I think people have all sorts of different preferences. So I think it could be a number of options that you could even put out there, when you reach out to the folks. And I think going along with that, approaching it like it's a joint exploration. That's been my favorite conversations with people. Is a lot of times, I don't have like a position to offer right away. And I think that's probably a very common experience, but I am really interested. I always learn from the people that I talk to, the UVA students and recent graduates who have called me. I'm, like Lee, I'm so impressed, and I feel like I learn from these conversations. And so I feel like it's a half an hour mutual brainstorming session where we're thinking about, okay, like, have you thought about this, or tell me what you're interested with this. And so that feels very generative and very productive. And oftentimes I'll be like walking outside while I'm talking, it's just like a nice way to get some fresh air, break in my day. And so that's a really positive thing for me. And it helps a lot when the students come prepared with very concrete questions, because a lot of times it's like that tiny half an hour in my day that I just came off a meeting and I have another meeting, and I know you wrote me this thing, but I couldn't fully remember right now. And so having that brief introduction and what you're hoping to get out of the call, and then you not being afraid to drive the call. It's like, well, I want to spend this half an hour on however is most helpful for you. So ask me exactly what you want to know, and we'll talk about it together. So those have been really helpful conversations for me, and those would be a couple of things that I would suggest.
I would also say, if you do connect with someone, don't be afraid to ask to be connected with other people, right? So a good final question is, who else do you think I should talk to? Whether you're talking to someone over email or on the phone. So one of the students that I talked to from UVA this spring was interested in videography and starting a videography business. And I know a couple owners of video marketing agencies who would, have built a career around video. And so those were great connections. So you're not just interested in one person that you're connecting with when you're networking. You're really interested in their connections too. There are probably other people they can connect you with. They might not even be the best person for you to talk to. So don't be afraid to ask, who else should I talk to?
Yeah, I'm just reading ahead to the one question on what's normal etiquette, and I'm amazed that even while I was in grad school, I had people that were just reaching out to alum on LinkedIn, just straight up asking, like, "Hey, I see you work at X company. Can you get me a job there?" And I think everything that's been brought up through everybody else on this call, it's make it personal and put that message in place on why you're reaching out. It could be like, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing," and it seems like you have a really interesting path that is something I may want to pursue. Do you have 10, 15 minutes, or just some, if you want to do it over email, just a couple tips on how I can start going down that path. So again, make it authentic and just don't ask for a job right off the bat. Just make it personal.
Yeah, I think you'll be surprised about how willing people are to help you out, because most people who are successful got help from somebody else at some point in time. So most are trying to pay it forward or backward, however you want to say it. And I also get plenty of requests if someone and like a friend of yours wants to enter a certain segment, or is looking through LinkedIn and they don't have a connection, but you do, they'll ask you to connect them. So don't be afraid to go through somebody if you have that kind of more tangential aspect or connection. It's no one's going to take it amiss, and if you don't try, then you're never going to succeed. So.
And a great example, students, is that I asked these people to volunteer their time for an hour and a half for a webinar, and they're all here doing that to help you. So they're willing, an hour and a half, you can send them an email and ask some questions. So thank you all again so much. And students, thank you for attending. We're going to have this recording available and send it out to all of you. Panelists, again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And everyone, stay healthy, and thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, all. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Go Hoos.
Take care.